In 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Madison Forum. I'm John Colbert. Our guest is Kira Loehr, who is Acting Executive Director of the Citizens Utility Board of Wisconsin, CUB. And thanks for coming in on the program, Kira, and talking to us about a number of issues, including how much we're going to be paying for heat, for the heating of our homes over the winter in Wisconsin. Always a challenge and always an expense. I would imagine it's going to be more.
It's going to be more, but the good news, John, is that it's only going to be slightly more. We're still in an area of low natural gas prices, thankfully well down from what we were 2005, 2006, 2007. It's actually going to be very similar to last year. Right now, futures are trading just under $4 per MMBTU and expected to stay pretty close to that throughout 2014.
So when you say up just a little bit, we talking 5% or less than that?
Less than that.
We're talking 1%, 2%, 3%?
Right around in there.
Right
it
around.
Still varies by day, expected futures. But
so if I wanted to say 2 or 3%, that would be fairly accurate.
Yes.
Well, that's not too shabby, considering what it had been, as you mentioned, almost a decade ago now, but 8 years ago, certainly 7, 8 years ago. What was going on then that drove the prices up?
Well, Hurricane Katrina was a big contributor to that. The disruption down in the Gulf had a big impact, and then the markets took a while to settle down from that. And in addition, there was a shortage of gas overall. Now there's significantly more supply available, and that's contributing to much lower prices. What's
driving that supply?
As you know, a healthy chunk of that is fracking, natural gas hydrofracturing, as well as an increase in the number and quantity and size of pipelines for delivering the gas.
Is this all good that we have more gas, and or are there issues that arise with the harvesting, if you will, of gas supplies?
Fracking is something that's going to need to be closely monitored, and more study is necessary to find out exactly what kind of impacts that it has. But from a pure supply and demand perspective, and from a cost perspective for consumers, particularly for heating this winter, it is a beneficial thing.
Tell us how that came about. Is this relatively new, the fracking, or and what all's involved in it?
Actually, John, I'm not that much of an expert in that area.
You're more of an expert than I am, I bet.
I really don't know.
But I mean, as far as the gas has always been there, right? I mean, it's something. It's just a matter of getting it out of the ground.
Right.
And what has when did you start first? When did we start first hearing about fracking, and what has it meant?
Caveating again with this
Sure.
really isn't my area of expertise. It's my understanding that fracking as a concept has actually been around for quite a while. By that I mean in the neighborhood of 20 or 30 years. But it really took off in the last few years, and honestly I'm not sure what the impetus was for the increase.
Okay, but for consumers it means a bigger supply, and is it an infinite supply, or do we know about that?
We're not sure about that either. It's hard to believe that any fossil fuel is an infinite supply, but it's certainly greater. The accessibility is greater than was previously thought.
What does this mean now for, I know the state legislature was looking at a bill or two that would restrict the ability of local governments around the state to impose restrictions on fracking operations. And I know it hasn't passed, and either it hasn't been sent on to the governor, but is that something you folks get involved in?
It really isn't. We're a consumer advocate group that's primarily focused on rates. Cost is a big impact for us because, as you know, Wisconsin rates have been rising dramatically over the years. So we focus more on what we can do to make electricity reliable and affordable for people.
The rates have been rising over the years, but this year, as far as the home heating costs, they're not going to be. What about the electricity rate? First of all, let me ask you about home heating. When it comes to that, almost the vast majority of homes in Wisconsin do heat with natural gas, don't they?
That's true, yes.
Was it like 80%?
Something like that, yes.
That. And the others, fuel oil, or even some wood, electricity, I would imagine.
Exactly, you got that mix.
Are those prices going up as well?
Electric prices for a handful of the utilities will be going up in 2014. Northern States Power Company, which is in the northwest area of the state, is in for a rate increase right now. The commission has yet to decide that, but it's looking like some electric rate increase will come out of that case. Wisconsin Public Service Corporation in the Green Bay area primarily also had a rate increase, applied for a rate increase before the Public Service Commission. Though in this instance, it's looking like the net result of their application is actually going to be a decrease for residential and small business customers and a hold at zero for the large industrial customers.
And were you involved in that case as well?
We were. We were fighting hard in that case to try to keep rates as low as possible because it's just been tough over the years as rates have continually risen. So we took a close look at some of the costs that Wisconsin Public Service Corporation was proposing, and with fuel costs also dropping, the end result was a decrease.
And the case has been finalized now by the PSC?
The order has not been officially issued, the written order, but the Commission has had its final discussion on the topic. Okay,
I want to get back to electricity rates, but I just want to nail it down a few things yet when we're talking about the cost of heating over the winter. Are there things that people can do, even though the projection is that the costs are not expected to skyrocket, certainly this winter, unless something unforeseen happens, and I would imagine that's always a possibility.
Right.
The severity of the weather of the winter plays a role too, right? Talk about that.
Absolutely. And 2 years ago in 2012, that was only last year. We're not in 2014 yet. We had a very warm winter, which really helped out both in costs and in terms of the energy supply. This winter is looking a little bit colder, looking again somewhat similar to last year, both weather-wise and cost-wise.
And nobody, we have a law in Wisconsin, so nobody gets shut off, right?
Through April 15th.
Yeah, and it started, I think, November 1st. It's the wintertime moratorium on utility cutoff, so even if people don't have the money to pay, they're not going to get disconnected in January and freeze to death. That's the theory behind that law. And then the utilities, the representatives from the utilities, and we've had them on from Madison Gas and Electric and so forth, where they tell us that if people can't pay, that they should, rather than not just tossing their bill away or whatever, they should get in touch with the utilities and try to work some sort of a plan out, because they're willing to, rather than get in arrears by several hundred or even thousands of dollars. Is that what you hear too in Counsel?
Yes, and that is very important, because in order to be covered under the moratorium as it starts November 1st, your bill has to be paid. So if you get too far into arrears during the moratorium period and can't make it up for the rest of the year, then you can't stay on for the next year. And there are a variety of assistance programs available. The Keep Wisconsin Warm Cool Fund, which the 5 major investor utilities help operate, is available for assistance. Most of the individual utilities, including Madison Gas and Electric Company, also have their own energy fund where customers contribute to help other customers, which we're very supportive of. Another way that customers can try to help themselves is by having energy audits through the Focus on Energy program. That's one way to ensure that you're not unnecessarily losing heat and then paying more just because it's leaving the building or otherwise is not being handled efficiently. And Focus has a lot of programs for residential customers to help them decide and help them implement things they can do.
So you're talking about weatherization, things like that?
Exactly.
And is there, when you say help, is it financial help? Can people get some sort of assistance in doing this?
It is both. It is financial help, and they will also come to your home and audit and identify problems for you, and then identify programs that they have that could financially assist with the problems.
Do those programs get a lot of business? Do you know? Is there a lot of interest in that, or is it some feel good things in government that we're talking about here?
There has been a lot of interest in the programs, which is good, because it's nearly there's no point in wasting energy or electricity, and by having not energy efficient windows, inefficient appliances, if those things can be changed, they should, and I'm glad Focus is available to help people with that process.
How much taxpayer money is involved here?
Taxpayer money, none. It's paid for through a surcharge on electric rates.
Okay, for all the utilities?
Yes.
And that's been in place for some time. I'm thinking maybe 15 years or so.
The public benefits program has been in place longer. Focus on Energy, I should have checked on that, but
Oh,
I'm
that's
not
all right.
exactly sure when it started.
Sometime in the past couple of decades, anyway.
Yes.
And it's focused on energy. And does the state then also have its own program?
It does. Through the Department of Administration, the Division of Energy Services has its own program, partially funded by the Federal Low-Income Heating and Energy Assistance Program that people can apply for on a county-by-county basis.
You're listening to Madison Forum. 10:21. Excellent. So we'll go another 10 or so. The last one's the only one that's time sensitive.
Okay.
We can talk about electricity rates. I want to start out just and talk about CUB, though, and the history of it. And
Okay.
Are you good with that?
Yep.
Yeah. How long have you been with them? 3. We'll go about 10 now. In 3, 2, 1. Our guest on Madison Forum is Kira Loehr, who is acting executive director of the Citizens Utility Board. Tell us about CUB, as it's called, Kira.
Next year will be CUB's 35th anniversary. We've been around for a very long time, acting as the utility watchdog for the state. We're a private nonprofit organization now. Started out originally as a creation of the legislature, but I believe it was 1986 that we were reorganized as a private nonprofit. I've been with CUB for the last 3 years in-house, and before that I worked in private practice and represented them as an outside attorney. I think CUB has been an exceptional organization on a lean budget with limited resources, has been fighting for customers, residential, farm, and small business customers, in front of the Public Service Commission, the courts, and the legislature to try to keep rates affordable, along with keeping service reliable. And we're happy to continue that mission on into the future.
In 35 years, I recall I was covering the legislature when that passed, so that would have been in 79 then.
That's
when
right.
It became law. And Lee Dreyfus was governor at the time. He was a Republican. Democrats control both houses in the state legislature by significant margins. And one of the main sponsors of the legislation to authorize the Citizens Utility Board. And again, as you mentioned, when it started out, it was a quasi-public agency.
Yes.
And one of the sponsors was the State Senate Majority Leader Bill Bablich of Stevens Point, the late Bill Bablich. He died a couple of years back. And I recall doing stories at that time, and it was he said it was the most hotly, and he'd been in the legislature for some time, the most hotly lobbied, contested legislation he had seen. A lot of money spent by groups opposed to CUB, and as in utilities, didn't want somebody, the watchdog at the State Public Service Commission. And money spent also by those who were advocating for it, but especially in opposition. But it did pass both houses and was signed by former Governor Dreyfus. And to begin with, there was some animus between utilities and the Citizens Utility Board. Is that still there? By nature, will that always be there? What's the story these days, Kira?
I think by nature, there's always going to be some level of discord because it's in the utilities' shareholders' interest to try to increase earnings and profits, and it's in customer interest to keep those as low as possible. So there's always going to be tension there. At the same time, I don't know that it's necessary for us to be at each other's throats. It's important that utilities be able to provide reliable and adequate service, but that they need to do so at the lowest cost possible, and that's our focus, is trying to control those costs.
Are you completely a private organization now?
Yes.
You have no public money at all?
Well, we receive grants from the Public Service Commission.
Okay. Where do they get the money? Is that just
from customers,
okay.
From electric customers.
Okay. What is the budget these days? How much money do you have? You say it's a lean budget.
It is a lean budget. We're under $900,000, and that includes, at this point, 3.5 staff and numerous expert witnesses. The Commission funds CUB on a case-by-case basis to bring in experts in particular fields as is necessary and important for each individual case. And we contract with those individuals and bring them in to provide testimony.
Anything, and what's your record? Do you generally get to shave some money off the requests? What would you say about that?
We do. We have a pretty decent track record where for about every dollar that is provided to CUB, we are saving an average of more than $100 for customers. We fight to keep that ratio as high as possible, and we're pretty proud of it.
Early on, you were talking about some of the cases either before pending before the State Public Service Commission, or have been recently? Anything pending right now locally as far as Madison Gas and Electric or Alliant, I'm thinking? Do they generally come in the spring, or what's the...
They do generally come in the spring. This past year, in early 2013, MG&E came in, and we actually worked with them to help negotiate a rate freeze. So MG&E had its first year in over 15 years where it was not asking for a rate increase. Alliant is still under a rate freeze from 2 years ago. It was another settlement that we helped negotiate with them. And I do believe both Madison Gas and Electric Company and Alliant will be coming in the spring for a rate increase for 2015.
But the freeze is in effect for MG&E through 2014?
Yes.
Okay. So the next increase would be in 2015. And how were they able to do that? And you say you worked with them to come up with a freeze when in a time when it seems like everything is going up, and it has when it comes to electric rates, gas rates, and so forth. Excuse me. What brought about that freeze? Was it again the glut of supplies of natural gas?
Actually, that was a big contributor. Wisconsin now has new fuel rules, and under those fuel rules, the utilities project what their fuel costs are going to be for the next year, and then set their rates at an amount of money designed to collect that. If they end up over-collecting on fuel costs, if fuel costs don't cost as much as they thought they would, then they must refund that amount to customers. So that refund has helped in the MG&E settlement and also helped in the Wisconsin Public Service Corporation case this year.
And when you say CUB worked with them to bring about that freeze, what does that mean?
That means we negotiated with them on particular issues as to whether they could or should have an increase on this particular topic, and how much of the refund should be applied to their potential increase.
CUB also has been involved in there are major issues going on in the state, have been recently with the transmission issue. In fact, Charlie Higley, who used to be in your role as the executive director of the Citizens Utility Board, now is with American Transmission Company, which has been trying to keep the lights on, is what they say in their commercials. And they were successful in getting the State Public Service Commission to approve a big line that cuts across Dane County from the southeastern portion of the county over to Middleton, and that's was up and operating as of February of this year. Now the transmission company is coupling with another firm, and I can't recall who it is, but they want to put in a big line up from the La Crosse area down to Madison. Correct?
That's right.
What's the status of that, Kira?
American Transmission Company and Northern States Power Company / Excel up in the Northwest filed a joint application, I believe it was early October, with the Public Service Commission to construct that line. And just about a week or so ago, the Public Service Commission issued additional, they're called data requests, questions to the utilities to help complete the application. They had 153 specific items they wanted the utilities to complete and provide more information on before the application itself could be deemed complete, and then the case would officially begin.
So it'll be a while yet.
I think so. I think it's going to take a little bit for them to respond to those questions. Once they do respond to those questions, the commission can potentially have more questions, either in follow-up to what they responded to or on other areas.
And they don't have have they submitted options for the route? Because I know they were looking at a couple of different options, up, how far north it starts in La Crosse County and things
They have
that.
Submitted two alternatives,
Okay.
as they're required to under the statute.
So that's all been done. What is CUB's position on this? This is ATC, American Transmission Company, and remind Excel?
Excel.
Excel,
yes.
Which is Northern States Power.
Yes.
Yeah, they say that we need this because we have more people using, the use is up, and we need to keep up with the transmission. What has CUB said about this?
This is one that we're going to need to take a close look at from a need and cost perspective, but this is also a somewhat unique situation in that this project is one of 16 or 17 in what's called a multi-value portfolio that was approved by the MISO, Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, a couple years ago as part of a package of projects where the costs are shared across the entire MISO region and where the projects both individually and collectively, are supposed to have local and regional benefits. So it'll be looked at a little differently than some of the prior transmission lines.
You're listening to Madison Forum.